The Rams in the last few years were a team that felt Super Bowl ready, and they actually were Super Bowl ready, but they were just missing one key component. And obviously, that key component being a quarterback that can take them all the way and win it all. Now, technically, they had a quarterback that could take them all the way, but that ended up being a gigantic flop. That quarterback being former first overall pick from 2016, Jared Goff. Jared Goff took them to Super Bowl 53 in the 2018 season, and they failed miserably against the New England Patriots and Tom Brady. So after that Super Bowl, Jared Goff progressed significantly after that, and by the end of the 2020 season, head coach Sean McVay had enough of him. He seemed ready to move on. He seemed ready for a change, and sometimes visibly so. A few weeks after that divisional game in the 2020 season against the Green Bay Packers, after the Rams had lost that game, the Rams made a big-ass trade for the now former Detroit Lions quarterback Matthew Stafford and gave them 2 first-round picks, a boatload of other picks, and, of course, Jared Goff. The Rams, because of that, didn't really do much in the offseason because not only of the trade, but also their limited salary cap, their money. But they managed to snag a bit of a steal in third-round pick Ernest Jones of South Carolina, a linebacker. But despite all that, Sean McVay finally had the quarterback that he wanted, and, he hoped that would finally get Los Angeles over the hump and into a Super Bowl title. Now, in terms of their regular season, for the most part, things look very promising early on for the newly led Matthew Stafford LA Rams. Aside from a few Stafford moments, what I mean by Stafford moments, like Detroiting moments, where Matthew Stafford would just, throw a bunch of interceptions, like take some like really stupid sacks. Those Detroiting moments for Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford, nonetheless, looked rejuvenated playing under Sean McVay with his fastball throws to Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods early in the season. Speaking of Cooper Kupp, played lights out, played like one of the best receivers in the NFL, and eventually became the best receiver in the NFL. It was that Stafford and Cooper Kupp connection that had the Rams offense lining up the NFC by storm. The Rams defense, they were a good unit in the early portion of the season, but of course not the one that we would see much later on. Still, hard for offensive lines to contain Aaron Donald, and for most receivers, hard for them to get past Jalen Ramsey in coverage. So, by the midpoint of the season, the Rams were 7-1. They were still trying to find their footing against the Arizona Cardinals, who were 7-0 at the time. But you got some big early wins over the defending Super Bowl champion, the Tampa Bay Bucs, and Tom Brady, and the division rival Seahawks. But pretty much after that, you enter a tough 3-game stretch that saw both sides of the ball struggle. Again, Stafford, during this 3-game stretch, would have his Detroit moments, and he threw pick sixes in all 3 of those losses to the Tennessee Titans, the 49ers, both in prime time, and the Green Bay Packers. And the overall offense also hit a snag when they lost Robert Woods, their former number 2 receiver now, to a torn ACL just days before that Niners game. So they brought on the recently released Odell Beckham Jr. from the Cleveland Browns. And for Beckham, he was still trying to get acquainted with the offense during that 3-game stretch. And also during that time, the Rams traded for former Super Bowl MVP for the Denver Broncos, Von Miller, at the trade deadline. But he didn't become an integral part of that defense until after the losing streak. And as a result, the defense was struggling in the pass rush and creating these stops on the secondary. So for Los Angeles, that promising start early in the season started looking like an anomaly for them. But they managed to turn it around in December, winning their final 5 or 6 games to catch up and eventually beat the Arizona Cardinals, who were also in their typical late season downward spiral. They clinched the NFC West at the end of the season, but there was a caveat to how they clinched it. So they had some help from the Arizona Cardinals because Arizona gave them the division by losing to Seattle at home. And by the time that happened, the Rams were losing to the 49ers in overtime after blowing a 14-point lead in the second half. And they eventually lost because Matthew Stafford threw an underthrown ball to rookie corner Ambry Thomas. And that sent San Fran to the playoffs. as a consequence. What the hell? So for Los Angeles, not exactly a great confidence builder to clinch the NFC West and going into their own playoff run. But I guess for them, they went on to quickly erase that bad memory of Week 18 by taking care of Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals very easily in a primetime Monday night Super Wildcard game. Then they went to Tampa to get out to a big lead over Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Bucs, but they also saw that big 27-3 lead quickly and methodically evaporate thanks to Cam Akers, their running back, commit 2 costly fumbles, and that eventually led to Tom Brady and the offense tying it up by the fourth quarter, like with less than a minute left. But Matthew Stafford, when it came to nut-busting time to get the big dick out, he had his career-defining moment, hitting it to an open Cooper Kupp, getting away from the defense, and getting them enough yardage, just enough to get into Matt Gay's field goal range to eliminate the defending Super Bowl champions and assuring of a new one. And then they get into the NFC Championship game, hosting it against the San Francisco 49ers, and we saw a slow start for them. The defense from the 49ers that just overwhelmed Matthew Stafford again. But then you get to the fourth quarter, they let Kyle Shanahan and Jimmy Garbage fail, overcomplicate things for them, and Stafford and Kupp came clutch when it mattered most against the Niners team that just had their limitations finally catch up to them, to be honest with you. And the Rams got to the Super Bowl, and they became the second team straight to play in the Super Bowl in their home stadium, with another caveat. They were the visiting team. They were the designated visiting team. So sorry, you don't get to make that kind of history. The Bucs already did that for them. So they went on to face Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals in Super Bowl 56, and it was pretty much a game of survival for them. Sure, they got off to a fast start. They had a breakout performance from Odell Beckham Jr. So for Matthew Stafford and this offense, it seemed like they were going to take care of Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati team. But unfortunately, in that second quarter, the energy of that offense just got wiped out once Beckham went down with a ACL injury of his own. So that was just a huge loss for that Rams offense, because throughout the good majority of the game, that offense just looked lost. Matthew Stafford was throwing interceptions in the end zone, and it was not looking good for LA. And once you begin the second half, Jalen Ramsey allows a big play to happen from Joe Burrow, and all of a sudden the Cincinnati Bengals are leading that game. I think it's 16-13, I believe. And for much of that game, the Rams offense couldn't really do anything. But then again, here we go in busting time. When it comes to less than 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, Cooper Kupp broke it open for another MVP level performance. Cooper Kupp connected with Matthew Stafford one more time in the end zone. Touchdown. Little penalties, but nonetheless, got a touchdown. Rams got the lead back, and they had to get another stop, one last stop on the Cincinnati Bengals, and that's what Aaron Donald and that vaunted defensive line did on a pretty bad, pretty shitty Cincinnati Bengals offensive line. So after all that, after getting one more stop at midfield, the Rams finally got what they sought for in 20 plus years, their second Super Bowl title. And for Matthew Stafford, it was a long time coming for him. He's been on pretty shitty Detroit teams, and he goes to Los Angeles, and his first season gets what he finally wants, a Super Bowl title. And for this Rams team, it could certainly say that all-in gamble, this win now approach, it paid off for them. Just like with how the Bucs got the gravy with Brady in 2021, in the 2020 season, the Rams put all the cards, they pushed all the chips in on Matthew Stafford. And yes, he didn't do as much as in the divisional game, as well as, I guess, a little bit of the NFC Championship game. But for the most part, he really benefited the Rams. He gave the Rams a lot of juice. And, when it came to nut busting time, unlike Jared Goff, he gave the Rams a clutch performance. And Cooper Kupp, no doubt about it, was the best receiver in 2021. Not Devontae Adams, not Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp. His elusiveness, his speed, and ability to make the catch, and relentlessness to get that touchdown really elevated the Rams offense and helped them get that Super Bowl in a big way. And, getting the midseason acquisitions for Odell Beckham and Von Miller also turned out to be pretty good for Los Angeles. Getting Odell Beckham gave Matthew Stafford a reliable number 2 after Robert Woods went down. And for Von Miller, it gave Aaron Donald some much needed help in the pass rush. So pretty much all of this is coming from a 49ers fan. But, I guess you could say I'm willing to admit that the Rams are certainly doing a hell of a lot more than my 49ers and pretty much any of the NFC West teams to accomplish a Super Bowl. Even for them, even if it potentially mortgages for the Rams their long-term future. So nonetheless, a very successful gamble pays off for the LA Rams, and for them, they're currently in an offseason to try and have hope for a repeat in 2023 or 2022, 2023, whatever. So it wasn't easy to begin with, though. They were in the red, minus $14 million in cap space, so a little bit maneuvering, a little bit of shuffling in terms of contracts, in terms of who they have to release, who they have to let go. Some of the key free agents included Von Miller, Odell Beckham, 2 key pieces that they got in midseason, Darius Williams at corner, defensive tackle Sebastian Joseph Day, running back Sony Michel, who came on pretty early, right guard Austin Corbett, and center Brian Allen. 2 kind of key pieces in the offensive line. So some of their offseason moves already was signing Matthew Stafford to a long-term contract extension, so pretty much rewarding him for bringing him a Super Bowl title. They also traded away receiver Robert Woods to the Tennessee Titans for a 6th-round pick, so they kind of got rid of his contract for cap purposes. Unfortunately, they also saw their longtime left tackle Andrew Whitworth retired, so I guess you could say for Whitworth, he went out on top. Perhaps one of the biggest moves that they made in the offseason so far was getting former Seahawks linebacker Bobby Wagner, who got released by Seattle, and they also got former Bears receiver Allen Robinson. So you get a big addition on defense to replace Von Miller, and you get an addition to replace Robert Woods and maybe Odell Beckham and Allen Robinson. So they're expecting big things for Mr. Robinson. And then they lose Von Miller to the Bills. They also release Johnny Hecker, their punter, and he goes to the Panthers along with guard Austin Corbett. They also lost their corner Darius Williams to the Jacksonville Jaguars and Sebastian Joseph Day to the crosstown LA Chargers. So for the Rams, a lot of key losses, but they hopefully for them, they countered it with some big additions. So for the Rams, they have about $8 million in cap space, so enough to net to sign their draft picks, which won't happen until the 3rd round because of trading away first round picks all throughout these years. So they're currently slated to pick at 104, the 3rd round, ladies and gentlemen, in the NFL draft. But LA doesn't give a shit. They don't give a shit. So for the Rams, some of the things that they need to address for the rest of this offseason is getting some offensive line help in the draft or in the bargain bin. So it's going to be a little tough for them to find that gem, to find whoever's left in the free agent market. So especially because, they lost Whitworth due to retirement. Austin Corbett is on the Panthers now. So the Rams have to revamp that offensive line a little bit, or they're going to risk running into, trotting out what they have. And so the scouting department is going to have to look long and hard at finding a potential 3rd round offensive lineman that could replace either one. So it's going to be tough for them. They also have to get a corner opposite Jalen Ramsey. And like with the offensive line, risk trotting out the current crop. The next man up is David Long after Darius Williams left to the Jaguars. And, looking at some of the film for David Long, some of the highlights that are out there, he's kind of He's kind of pretty average. So they either have to look long and hard at the late rounds of the draft, hopefully get some sort of steal in the fourth round or the fifth round, or they have to turn to the veteran market, or maybe just take a chance at what they have. So for Los Angeles, they made that big risky gamble in trading for Matthew Stafford, but it worked out in the end. They got him the championship, and that's all that matters for them. Sure, they had a rough stretch in between midseason, and there were down moments for Matthew Stafford, but their all-in plan worked out in the end. They still have their quarterback, they still have their top receiver, their top defensive tackle, and they also got some key additions, even with all the maneuvering with the money. So even if they weren't able to get some of the band back together, the Rams in 2022, even if they continue to defy the salary cap and find some whatever hidden gems in the draft, they could be smelling repeat in what might be an uncertain and pretty weak NFC. So for the Rams, they went all in and then paid off pretty damn big.